to check and see what's left. This would for maybe one.
Sorry, good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a nice evening this evening. So we are all having a good night's evening and it's beautiful weather, 89 degrees outside as always.
Nice.
It's very nice and warm. The meeting of the May 21st, 2026 Forest Grove School District Budget Committee meeting is called to order at 6 p.m. Let's go ahead and have a flash please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's have a roll call for this evening. Jennifer Thomas here. Suzanne Field.
Here.
Melinda Fisher.
Here.
Lisa Franco.
Here.
Kate Kandusky.
Here.
Nicholas Hafez here. Lucy Cotte.
Here.
Alma Lozano.
Here.
Jordan Miller here. Pete Truex here. And Maya Andrade. Okay. Approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chair. Do I have a second, Mr. Chair? Mr. Truex, okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the May 14th, 2026 meeting minutes as presented? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Eileen Cruz, you want to go ahead and take over?
Thank you.
All right.
This is on this time. So tonight, I'm gonna just start by listening to that. Reframing the budget committee responsibilities and the budget process, and then we'll go into budget questions that we've received over the last week. And so just as a reminder, our budget committee's role is to review and discuss the budget and its assumptions, test the budget assumptions against district goals and the strategic plan, listen and consider public feedback, and then approve the budget for recommendation for the board to adopt. As a quick reminder of what the budget committee doesn't do, talk about specific staff members, set or replace salary schedules or benefit levels, add or delete major programs, or develop policies. So that's just budget committee roles and responsibilities. At the end of the day, you have a few different options. Sorry, thank you. Approve the budget as it's proposed, increase the appropriations if we think we're going to get more resources, decrease the appropriations if you believe we have too many resources built into this budget. And then the last one is move appropriations between major functions. So this is the instruction to support services to instruction example. A quick reminder about the community engagement process through this budget season. We've been working on this budget process since January. We started with community and staff feedback in February, along with the budget committee meetings. We had the budget committee meetings on the last 2 months, so budget 101, budget 102. We've had the budget committee meeting last week. We have this week's budget committee meeting. There's the optional one for next week. And then we have one more last opportunity for public to provide feedback on this budget. And that'll be at the board hearing on June 9th. And so at that time, we'll publish in the newspaper a week ahead of time, a summary of this budget, and then we'll have one more opportunity for public comment at that meeting. To go into the budget questions, I just wanted to start by saying thank you to everybody who provided their questions and I had conversations with. I really appreciate the conversations and trying to just understand where everybody's interests are and what everybody's looking at the budget document. We have a lot of really great questions in here, and so I tried to capture everybody's questions through this last week. And if there is something that I missed where you guys still have questions, please feel free to let us know throughout tonight. So the first question isn't one that came up since the last week, but is one that we talked about last week in the budget meeting. And this is really around changes after adoption. There's a lot on this slide, but what I wanted to focus on is the 10%. So if we are going to change or increase our appropriations by greater than 10% in any major fund, then we would have to hold another board hearing to be able to do that. So we would publish the change in the newspaper and then hold another board hearing. If it's under 10%, then the board has the authority to do that without a public hearing, but it would still be done in a public meeting. The other one is transfers between funds, and the transfers between funds, we can move resources from one fund to another as long as it doesn't go over 15%. If it goes, it just can't go over 15% in the fiscal year. But it's still subject to the 10% rule. The next question that came up during last week's budget meeting was about the corporate activity tax and the student investment account. And so I wanted to provide a little bit more information about that. I know we got into it a little bit last week, but the student investment account is one of our grants that we get. It's a part of the corporate activity tax, House Bill 3427, that was passed in 2019. And these resources get split two ways. The first 200 million goes into the state school fund, and then the rest gets split three ways. the first, at least 50% goes into the student investment account, which is this grant. Then up to 30% goes to statewide initiatives, and then at least 20% goes to the early learning account and preschool promise. We primarily get the student investment account and preschool promise resources from this.
Yeah, when you mentioned grants, are these competitive grants? Okay,
No,
good.
we still have to do a budget and we have to get a budget approved, and there's a process, a community engagement process through that. But it is not competitive. So when we look at Forest Grove Student Investment Account Grant, what we have built into this budget is $6.4 million. Just over 50% of that we have identified for health and safety, which includes counseling, mental health, instructional assistance, our family resource support, and safety and security resources, including our SRO contract was moved over there for this budget. So those are the health and safety items. We have our reserve pocket FTE in this grant. The well-rounded education grouping includes our online school, teaching and learning resources, ELD and reading specialists, teen parent and nursery contract, and then we have elementary music and PE FTE here. And then the last chunk is the requirements, so our Forest Grove Community School pass-through, and then our indirect rate, which becomes revenue to the general fund. So that's how we utilize this 6.4 million. It does include 45 FTE in this budget.
Can you speak a little bit more about the indirect rate that becomes revenue?
So many of our grants allow us to charge indirect rate to it. It helps cover the operating costs of managing that grant. Each year we submit all of our information on our expenditures, our overhead costs, and then that gives us a calculation for what percent we can charge to those grants. And then that is now included in local revenue in the general fund. And so that helps support us with all the state reporting that we have to do, with paying the payroll, just all of the overhead costs to managing that.
Work out to be a percentage, 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 or something?
Closer to 3 or 4,
Yeah.
typically. Yeah. It's pretty small.
I think our indirect rate, we get about $400,000 a year in indirect rate into the general fund through pass-through from grants.
7.
It's closer to 4% of the grant awards, yeah. Okay. Another question that came up last meeting that I wanted to provide some follow-up information on was the enrollment that we project in the budget compared to what enrollment actually comes in at the year. And so we try to be as close as possible, but still conservative on our projections of enrollment. And this is what helps drive our staffing allocations. This chart has the last several years of budget to actual enrollment and the differences. And we're normally between 95-98% of budget to actual. There was one year where we had a lot of growth, 22-23, where it was over, but typically we try to be a little bit on the conservative side on that. And in years where in declining enrollment, it's typically more conservative than increasing enrollment years. And then as far as using the February enrollment, we try to budget to what the February enrollment is going to be, because that's the average of the course of the year. We start off really high, we end really low. So when we look at our average daily attendance and our funding, February is typically the closest to that average of the year. So that's what we're trying to budget to. All right, a question that came up this week was about district comparables. And I want to start by kind of apologizing. Typically in Budget 101, we take some time and go through district comparables and look at how much we spend compared to other districts and what categories and how we're tracking. But this year we shifted things a little bit. And in Budget 101, we really started to have the robust conversation about ending fund balance and what our beliefs and values were around ending fund balance. So when we look at timing, there was something that I needed to cut and not put in there, and that was the one piece. And so tonight I have a couple of slides on just how we compare to our district comparables. The first one is average class size. We compare to typically Canby, Centennial, Corvallis, McMinnville, Newburgh, and then Hillsborough because they're our next door neighbor. The other ones are our financial comparable districts. Those are the ones we try to compare to because they have similar demographics. They have similar enrollment numbers. And so those are the ones that we always pull our financial comparables against. This shows average class size comparisons, K through 5, and then all subject grades. So all subject grades would be K-12 district-wide. When we look at K-4, we're right at average of our financial comparables or slightly above in a pocket. Grades 5, we are higher than our district comparables. However, we do have a different model than many of our comparables where we have 5 and 6, a split between elementary and middle school in its own space. And so they're not, grade 5 isn't necessarily in a true elementary K-4 building. So it is a different model. However, we do know, like we talked about last week, that that is the one hotspot that we have in this budget and that we have our eyes on for the reserve FTE utilization in the fall. And then when we look at all subjects, all grades, so across the entire district, we are below average to our financial comparables. We're at 23-1, whereas the average is 24-1. So we have our highs and lows, but overall district-wide, we are below the average for our average class size district-wide. And this is 2024 data because that's the last that was published by ODE. So it's a little delayed, but we are constantly monitoring it. The next one is the 24-25 general fund expenditures by major function. And this is the instruction is the green on the dark green on the top, and support services is the light green in the middle. All other spending is the blue line all the way at the bottom. And so this again is 2024-25 because that's the last fully audited fiscal year that we've been through, that we have comparable data to. And we have 61% spent on instruction and 58% is the average of all of our financial comparables. So we do have a higher rate spent on instruction than support services than our neighboring districts. Or not our neighboring districts, the average of our financial comparable districts. The next comparison that I have here is the ending fund balance. And ending fund balance is always a good kind of indicator. We do know that every district has its own financial situations. Canby, Newburgh, definitely those two probably don't want to compare ourselves against. In this example, Hillsborough, we have had conversations with them. They are working to get their ending fund balance up higher. That is not where they want to be. Not quite sure what's going on with Centennial and why theirs is so high. But if we look at the others, Corvallis and McMinnville, they're right there in the same line with us. That is about where we want to be to end the fiscal year.
One comment, one comment about the 24-25 ending fund balance. The budget that we are currently operating with plan to use a portion of this in expenditures this year. So again, this is 24-25 ending fund balance. We're in the 25-26 school year. We do not project our ending fund balance to be this high at the conclusion of this school year.
Another question that came up last week was about free and reduced meals and during conversations this week with the loss of CEP district-wide. And we were able to submit our initial application to extend CEP for our district for 4 more years. And our initial look is very promising. We do feel that we will be able to extend it for another 4 years. We won't know for sure for probably 3 to 4 more weeks, because we have to go back and forth and validate the data with the state. But our initial look is that we will have a 4-year extension on that. Looking at if we don't qualify for CEP and we still maintain free meals district-wide, we're looking at between $2 and $3 million impact to the general fund. Now I have plus and minus between 2 and 3. That is very broad because there's a lot of assumptions built into that. It depends on how direct certifications will play out over the next year or two. And that will have a significant impact on how that will fluctuate. So that kind of gives us a ballpark based on a couple of scenarios that we ran. But there's a lot of assumptions built into that.
That's if we maintain it free, is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
So, okay, that's not like parents paying for any of that.
No, that would be if we maintained 100% free meals, didn't require free and reduced applications, and did not qualify for CEP. Chrissy, you look like you have a question.
I did have a question. It was actually on the slide before. I had a question about if there's a state, any kind of state law or guideline or OASBO rule for districts on reserves. As far as, I mean, when you see the districts that are at 2.3, is there anything that protects districts from themselves that are getting so low that they're gonna run out? Is that something that school districts, it's up to each school district, or is that something the state ever talks about?
It is something that there's concerns about, but there's no state policy saying, I mean, you can't go negative, or you have to take out a loan or do other things. I have not been around anybody that's gone negative. But it's really up to the boards to have the policies and the, systems set in place internally.
Is what we see here in this comparative, if we looked across the state, would the graphs look like that
Mhm.
for? Yeah, okay, 197 districts. All right, thank you.
There's so many variabilities, so many different districts do things differently. Some districts maintain really small ending fund balance, but they have all of their resources in reserve funds. So the ending fund balance might look smaller, but their reserves are large. Some districts put all their reserves in the ending fund balance. Some districts are set up financially a little bit better than other districts. So there's a lot of variability.
Is Centennial one of the 9 that still have operating levies? Or there's just a few districts?
I'm not sure about Centennial. I know there's a few around us right now.
Mhm.
But I'll have to look that up.
All right, thanks.
The next up we have tonight is about the PBM and chart of accounts advocacy and updates conversation we got into pretty in depth last week. I just wanted to provide you guys with links and information to some of the advocating that we have done. I've sent 3 letters to the state, one in October, which is attached. The February one I did not attach because it goes into a lot of detail and it's just a lot. And then I did send another letter today to ODE on and the state board on the PBM and advocating for primarily, I have it on the next slide, primarily about our financial costs and the financial impact to the district, and how what we're hearing from ODE and the state is that it's not going to be that big of a financial impact to the districts, and that they're working with our software vendor to make sure that it's not a financial impact. However, there's so many different things that they're not considering. They're not considering all the training, the staff training, the cost for us to reconfigure everything internally and rebuild all of our internal systems and internal procedures and train our staff. So the one that was sent today was primarily about just the unfunded mandate and that they're underplaying the impact of this to us. But that is linked in this.
You mentioned last meeting that, and thank you for the letter. And if it's in here and I missed it, that's on me. But you were also mentioning that there is an unfunded cost to each school as executive assistants are going to have to undergo training. And was that part of the OD discussion, or was that left on the doorstep like some abandoned baby?
Maybe not like an abandoned baby.
They do talk about ODE creating training materials and supporting materials. However, each district is different, and the materials that they're going to provide, I just cannot imagine how it's going to be sufficient to train everybody in our system the way that they need to be trained.
If you just simply think about internal procedures, they're slightly different in every single district. They may be able to produce some training documentation that helps us crosswalk the new chart of accounts to the old chart of accounts and explain the ODE systems for how we utilize the revised PBAM and their processes. But because our internal systems differ from district to district in the way we do things, like who approves a requisition? What is that workflow? How many steps are involved in the process? All of that is unique to each district based on the size of the district, their configuration. There's no way ODE can prepare materials that can account for all of those unique contexts. And I don't even think they'll try. And to point, the financial office also has not tried to calculate those real costs.
I was also able to clip Eileen's little dissertation about the impacts, and we have it on our website, but I sent it to Rep. McLean and Senator Solomon's office. And then I also shared it with all the regional board chairs and asked if they would elevate it with their legislators. And it also shared with the legislative lead for OSBA. So that clip, Eileen, that was the best example, I think, of that speaks to a lot of different unfunded mandates. So thank you for that. But that is available. So budget committee members, you can grab that off the site and share in conversations when people are needing examples. But thank you for that.
Sorry, I have a question regarding, last meeting you had stated something about how this is going to impact the community school.
Director Franco, could you get a microphone or something on that? Thank you.
Last meeting, you had talked about how this is going to impact the community school. I was wondering if you know a little more into that and how that would work. And we talked about kind of like the consequences if the community school chose not to go with PBAM.
Well, they don't have a choice.
Okay, so I was wondering how that works.
So Forest Grove Community School right now is not required to use the chart of accounts that we're currently in. And they are not required to do a lot of the different reporting that we do. They do their reporting to us, and then, but they don't have to follow the current PBAM and they don't have to follow the current chart of accounts. So now we're taking a smaller 200 student school district that is using QuickBooks or similar smaller software accounting system and needing to convert to this 26 digit, I think it's 26 digits, account code structure and have to shift their entire model. I'm unaware that QuickBooks has the capacity to do that work. So for them to be able to do the full conversion to 100% following the PBAM and chart of accounts and monthly reporting to the state, that's going to be a significant overhaul, probably much greater impact for them than us. And it's now in law that they have to. So if they don't, then it's up to the district to make sure it's happening.
And what does that look like? Sorry, I'm just,
Which part of that?
I know from my understanding, community school is its own thing. So how does that fall to the district to be a responsibility to enforce that they?
Because we're their sponsor district. So all of their state funding is passed through from us. So So we get the resources for the community school enrollment, we pass it through to them, and then we have a contract with them saying that they're gonna meet certain guidelines. So the funding pass through, if we don't have all of the information or they don't pass it through to ODE at the end of the day, then our funding could then be at risk.
I understand that. Thank you.
Eileen, what is the rationale to do this? Is it BDAM?
PBAM, yeah.
Is it for alignment of all the schools, or what is the rationale for this?
It's part of the accountability measures that were passed last year, statewide. And it's to start aligning school districts, increasing transparency, making sure that there's just overall financial accountability across the state. I think there's been a lot of districts I don't know how this is necessarily going to solve the systematic problems across the state by requiring us to all convert to this new system. We're supposed to have less reporting at the end of the day, but yet we're supposed to do more reporting more regularly and monthly uploads. So I'm just unsure how this is really going to solve the systematic problems across the state. But it's part of that accountability measure that was passed last summer.
If I could add just a little bit to that, one of the questions that was asked in relation to the development of SB 141, which is the accountability bill that we're talking about, is what are schools doing with all this money we're giving them? And what the Department of Education had to admit when they were asked that question is they can't answer it. Partly because they don't have the systems themselves. Well, let me take that back. They collect a ton of information from school districts. Internal to the Department of Education, they don't have either the staff or the capacity or the internal software to help them turn data into information. I really do believe, based on the information that we send to them on a regular basis, if they wanted to know what Forest Grove School District was spending money on, they could very easily determine that. Director Clute could correct me if she thinks that is inaccurate. But they don't have the systems right now to do that. And so part of what the accountability bill mandated is that the Department of Education figure out how to get eyes into the finances of school districts. And the revised chart of accounts and the updated PBAM is one way they feel that they must go about that. The other aspect of this work is that the accountability bill does give explicit authorization to the Department of Education to direct funding for a school district, a portion of their funding. The syncing of our system with their system will allow them to be able to do what they have been mandated to do, which is to reach into a school's finances and direct the use of those finances if it comes to that. So I think there's multiple purposes behind this effort to update the accounting system with the Department of Education, but at the crux of it, I think Director Clute is correct in saying that this isn't going to solve the problem for districts that have found themselves mid-year in a position where they need to look for furlough days or lay people off, especially not now that we can't use furlough days anymore. This effort won't solve that problem in any way. And I don't have a great deal of confidence that the insight the department thinks they're going to get through these changes will provide them any more inferences or conclusions about how we're spending all this money that they're giving us and whether or not that's effective. Yes, sir.
So when you talk about Department of Education, are we talking the state Department of Education or the federal Department?
State. Thank
Any
you for that
other,
clarification.
any other state have adopted such a program? Are you aware? Then
There are states across the nation that have completely overhauled their financial system, their school financial system in particular. I am not a school finance expert, but I know that has been done. And I know that for those states where I have read this work has been undertaken, it has been done over the course of many, many years. It's typically a 3 to 5 year effort to overhaul the state financial system because it is so incredibly complex and because the ripple effects, the unintended impacts could be pretty significant if this isn't a slow, intentional process with a lot of feedback loops so that we don't unintentionally create harm through the updates that the Department of Education is proposing. So I do know states have undertaken it, and they've done so with professional expertise and support over the course of many, many years. You want to add to that?
Question.
Yes.
So do you see this being like a financial burden for us as well, on top of it all?
It will have a financial impact for us.
Will that come out of, do you see an impact coming from like our classroom resources?
We may have to make choices between whether we expend resources in the financial office to manage what will be required of us for this transition or expend those resources somewhere else. So there likely will be a trade-off. We don't yet know what that trade-off will be, but we anticipate having to face that.
And is that a part of this budget as well that we are working on? That's
yet.
not even there yet, okay. So it's something that
We'll have to navigate.
thank you.
And my understanding was that OASBO did say they were in agreement with finding areas where things could be streamlined and offered several options. In fact, I specifically remember you saying this in a meeting, maybe I mean, options that could be done without all of this that would have helped and would have gotten to the goal, Kate, that you were just mentioning. And the answer, and that was none of that was taken. But that was given as an option. So it wasn't like districts weren't saying, hey, yeah, there's some areas for improvement here to align.
I think there's one of the challenges, I think, is that the approach might not have been the greatest. Where in my perspective, people that aren't in this work every day were the ones creating this new chart of accounts, not quite understanding what it is and what it looks like, it feels like at the district level. ODE has received a lot of feedback from districts since October, November, and then through the spring. And they have shown areas of improvement on the chart of accounts. They reduced a couple of digits. They have kind of revamped and went back to some of our current structures in places. There's still a lot of places where there's just no give. And the other piece that they did give us is another year. So instead of implementing it this summer, it's going to be summer of 28 will be the start. But we will have to budget spring of 27 to budget the 27-28 school year. I think I have it one more slide.
Right, and to expand on that, we will have to face exactly your question this time next year because we will need to plan for whatever resources are necessary to implement July 1, 2028.
Yeah, and July through December of 27 will be our planning and time to reset the software systems and redevelop everything. So our spring of 27, when we're sitting here in May of 27 is when that'll be into the budget.
I think it's the software vendor aware of this, I'm sure.
The software vendor, we have 3 vendors that we have our our account code structure built into. The main one is School ERP Pro, Infinite Visions. They're our main accounting software, and the state is working collaboratively with them to do this restructure. And that's where they're telling the state that it's going to be no cost to districts. But I have not gone through a software conversion like this at no cost to districts. So I'm very skeptical.
Thank you.
And they're willing to support in some areas, but we still have all of our customized reports. We have budget controls set up differently. We have a lot of custom reports set up in our system, so those will all have to be redesigned. And Our accounting software company is not gonna do that for us,
For free.
not for free.
Well, I suppose we could tell them that we'll be withholding our annual payments by a certain amount to cover the cost of this no cost transition.
Well. That might not play out very well.
I think that was
You
hypothetical.
want to send this to jail.
Okay, I think we kind of skipped around between my three PBAM chart of account slides that I have here. The last thing I did want to mention just is the April 16th, 2026 state board meeting. I also have linked in this document. And there's an interesting memo in it that talks about the financial impact to districts, which is the one that I believe is underplaying the cost to districts. But also Grant County ESD and Corvallis School District have testimony in there that I think their letters were really well done, and a great resource.
Before we move on to answer the question about Centennial and their levy, they do have a levy.
All right. Now, I'm going to move on to specific questions about the budget document itself and questions that were from specific areas within the document. One reminder that I have is, and I didn't go over it last meeting, I should have, but is within the budget document in the general fund section under each function, it talks about what the function is, what the function means. And then I've gone through the detailed notes and pulled out anything of significant change and then tried talking about it under the notes section underneath. So if FTE increased by 2, it would say FTE increased by 2 due to X, Y, and Z. And so every major function within the general fund has some specific notes in it. The first question that came up was on page 39, general fund requirements by major object. The other objects category increased by 15%. And the primary cause or driver of that is our property insurance. We've had 2 very significant increase years for property insurance. Last year we estimated, I think 10 or 12% increase, and it actually came in much higher than that. So we have that to make up for. And then this budget is also anticipating between 13 and 15% increase, depending on which policy we're looking at for the upcoming budget year. But property insurance, casualty insurance, liability insurance, cybersecurity insurance, those are all increasing significantly. So that would be the increase on there.
Those aren't driven by claims that we've made, I presume.
No,
No, they're driven by claims other people have, other jurisdictions have made.
Well, that's across the board, isn't it? I'm
yes.
on our church's board and
Yeah.
insurance there is going through the roof.
this isn't isolated just to us.
Yeah, this is not somebody coming after Phyllis Grove School.
No.
The next one we have is page 41, general fund requirements by major function. Function level 2140, school site reduced by 14%. We moved 1.0 FTE to grant funding during the year. We moved 0.3 FTE to function 2160 during the year. We also moved the youth contact contract to our student investment account as part of our balancing for the year. And then we also reduced computer hardware in that budget because the budget for 2026 included a one-time purchase. So we did not need to have that in this year. 2160 other treatments increased by 31%. That was because of FTE changes that happened during this during 26. And then items that are within that group are like our occupational therapists, adaptive PE, and physical therapy. So those were just changes that happened during this year. Pages 40, 41, function 2550, pupil transportation increased by 17%. This one we've been bringing to the board most this year as over budget in the budget control group. And this is because we late last spring, we went through an RFP process and we finally negotiated a final contract. And so this current year, we've been over budget because of that final contract. When we budgeted last year, we didn't have the RFP process complete, and so we put in an estimate. But once we finalized that new contract and RFP process, we were able to build in the actual rates this year and adjust for last year. The other thing is we did increase 0.87 FTE for student transportation support during the year. And then that should be up. Interpretation and translation services, function 2680. We moved most of our SEMA translation and interpreting contract to student investment account for this budget. Page 43, human resources increased by 89,000 over the prior year's budget. This is because of a couple of different things. One is the tuition reimbursement costs. As part of our union negotiated contracts, we have new ratified contracts, and so we have that updated in this budget. We do have an increase for software costs for training and 3-2-1 training, including 3-2-1 Insight and Public School Works. And then our classified compensation study consulting is also in that area. Purchase services. On page 46, under our grants for our special revenue funds, purchase services increased by $1.7 million over the prior year's budget. And in the last couple of slides, I talked about how we were shifting expenditures over to SIA. So that's why you'll see some of the purchase services increasing in our special revenue requirements. We also have a new grant for high dosage tutoring and House Bill 3499 EL accountability that has purchase services included in that. Our supplies and materials in our special revenue funds also increased by 1.1 million. And a lot of this is just our placeholder. Wanted to talk a little bit about a difference in the way we budgeted grants this year versus prior years. This year, well, let me start with prior years. Prior years are grants on how we budgeted it this time during the year is we looked at the last 2 years on expenditure spending trends, and then we budgeted appropriations based on historical trends. This year, we did something a little bit different, and we actually looked at all of our major grants, and we had our grant administrator's budget line item detailed for us. And so this $1 million is really just a placeholder for anything that's not in the major grant bucket. And so we didn't distribute it by lines. I just put in an appropriation amount, but this will cover all of our small grants that I didn't individually line item out, like our SMILE grant or Associated Student Body Funds. So this gives us an appropriation to be able to use and expend all of those grants. It's just not line itemed out, whereas the budgets that we really focused on in here were our big ones, our Title I-A, our House Bill 3499 one, our SIA grants, and these are all in detail itemized out. They have staffing. The other ones are not staffing. They're mostly either services or supplies. And so there is a lump sum in there to give us that appropriation to expend those miscellaneous grants that we received throughout the year.
I have a question, going back here to the 300,000 high dosage tutoring grant, hey tutor, what is that?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So the grant itself is offered to school districts identified for not making the amount of literacy progress that the Department of Education was looking for. So we were identified as one of those districts. The grant has to be used specifically for those activities that qualify as high dosage tutoring. And what that means is essentially small group or one-on-one services provided to students in the area of math or literacy. During the school day, it could also be after the school day. So there was some flexibility in how we structured this. We were given some guidance by the Department of Education for those schools where they felt like the tutoring was most useful. This is an example of the Department of Education softly entering into some of that direct coaching and directed spending that we talked to with the chart account updates. And they were largely right in terms of the guidance that they provided us and which schools needed support. So we contracted with an organization called Hey Tutor. Hey Tutor is an in-person tutoring service. Their staff come to our schools. We identify students through the use of our benchmark and progress monitoring assessments who can benefit from the extra intervention. We group students based on their actual gaps and needs in those specific content areas. And then they work directly with the tutors that Hey Tutor provides for a period of time during their school day. It's not every school day, it's a couple days a week, but they are provided some intensive tutoring in their specific skill gap area. This is relatively new. We didn't start the school year with this grant. This came after the school year had already started. So we have everything in place right now. We are in the process of collecting data, as are Hey Tutor. They collect their own data as well. So we're cautiously optimistic that we're going to see some good outcomes from this. Anytime students get some very directed, targeted instruction, that typically is a good thing. So ultimate results to be determined, but early indications are that this is doing something really good for our kids.
Thank you.
The last question we received was about page 123, our trust and agency funds. And those resources, we call them our 700 accounts. But their resources we're holding on behalf of a group or another entity. So we do not have the authority to decide how to utilize those resources. We have two different types of accounts that are built into there. One is our insurance reserve accounts. So OSEA and OEA, our unions, have insurance reserves where when a employee opts out of insurance benefits, then we take a portion of that insurance cost and put it into a insurance reserve account for them to then utilize and buy down employees' health insurance costs through the back end. But then they get to decide how much they want to use every year, how much they want to apply towards insurance caps and insurance costs. So it's resources we're holding in a bank account on behalf of our associations. The other one is scholarship and trust accounts. We have a handful of scholarship accounts that have to be used for a specific purpose. So they're being held in a separate bank account and they are held for the scholarship purpose that was written into the donation at the beginning. So those are resources we are holding on behalf of someone else. That makes sense. And then the last slide I have for you tonight is just the state revenue forecast. We received the May release yesterday, and there was some really good information in there. Our net general fund and lottery revenue is up 30 million since June of 25, and it's significantly up since the March forecast. And then SIA resources are up 6.1 million since June and 23.7 million since March. Our state reserves maintain high. They've increased 399 million since the March forecast. And those include the rainy day fund, education stability fund, and then the state's general fund. So overall, it's good for the 25-27 biennial budget. However, we still do have advocacy needs and that we'll have to do going into this next legislative session for the 27-29 biennium. So we still have a lot of work ahead of us, but it's good. That's all I have for you tonight. If you have any questions, We have one more slide after public comments. We can do it before or after.
Well, and there's no public comments.
Oh, we
And
can move
anyway-
right on.
Anyone in the public would like to have a comment? No,
All right.
no
All right.
public comments.
So then in terms of questions, comments, or discussion, put a couple of prompts up here this time. Because I know some of you may not have any questions at all at this point, but you might have some reflections that you'd like to share with us. And really wanted to create the opportunity that anyone who wants to speak can speak. Of course, you can always pass. But I thought it might be helpful for us to just go around the table here and provide the opportunity for everybody to have either a comment or a question that they'd like to say. So if we could start across the table with Director Lozano. You have a reflection or a question you'd like to ask?
Oh my goodness. I have a list of questions, but I'm not gonna ask all of those right now.
Could you use the microphone, please?
Oh, yes, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I thought I was using my mom voice. Okay, well. I mean, mainly it's just the appreciation for, I know the time that's invested in creating this budget. So thank you to everyone involved in all of this. There's a lot of moving pieces and long-term considerations, so it's been a process to watch it all come about. A lot of questions, but Eileen, you've been really great about communicating and reaching out and, talking, and so has Dr. West. So thank you. So I guess, just as it being my first year, obviously looking at all this is just a lot of reflection, and not only like current realities, but long-term as well. So just very appreciative of everyone and, still being in a healthy place with our budget compared to many other districts, I think says a lot about our background here in school. So thank you.
Great, yes, thank you, Alma, and I would echo what Alma has said. Thank you. It's been a rewarding and informative experience. And I think as a reflection, the one thing that I appreciated most was a clarification of the board of directors' responsibilities. The difference, the difference between your responsibilities as a superintendent, Dr. West, and the responsibilities of the board. And having been a part of this community for a long time, I thought what was happening in the past was a lot of board driven, but I now understand a little bit more about that. So how it isn't always board driven. So I appreciate that clarification.
I think, format wise, I commented during the week, I really appreciate the left side of this book where I read through and it does explain the increases and decreases. And then I did have a couple of questions which were answered here tonight where I was able to call or just email and say, even though it says it was increased here, can you explain a little bit more? And so thanks to Dr. West and also Eileen for being able to always answer every question. I feel very confident that every question has an answer and will be answered. And so it's just being able to surface. This is my third year. So Alma, the first year I was looking at this book, there's a lot going on. I feel like by the third year, I am now starting to really have a depth of understanding about the budget, but there's still a lot more to learn as a school board person. But just even knowing, more, it makes me more appreciative of the work that goes into it. I know it's you and your team. And the last thing, that I wanted to talk about is I listened to the Board of Ed meeting this morning and I was there was a little bit of progress today. The Board of Ed directors actually were speaking up, and they were speaking about school budgets and the impact of their decisions on budgets, but they were surfacing details because there's a former superintendent on that board and several teachers on that board. They were finally surfacing the things that we are saying here at that level. And so I do believe there's becoming a greater shared understanding about how these budgets work in different layers of our community. And I think as we build in this community, I don't know how to do that, but continue to have the conversations to show people this book that we see is there for everybody to see, including those explanations. And for almost every question I've had for community member, I was able to find a place where it did explain that. And then if not, I could direct that person to the right people. So just building the communication with our community and building the trust. But I think why that's going to be key is, and you're mentioning it tonight, legislators and another senator yesterday was told by a different lobbying group that schools do not need more funding. So legislators are hearing from all different people, not only that we may or may not need funding, but they're also still hearing from every different special interest group. We need the funding for this. We need the funding for that. So they're not hearing any. So in our community, I think the more aligned we get on how we spend our money and what the funding is needed for, and that aligned advocacy just makes a stronger outcome. And that's all based on this clarity of the documents and the revamp of the documents we have in our meeting and being able to read the budget and share with people. So I think we're headed in the right direction as far as getting the word down and out, and then just working to continue to elevate and ask questions throughout the year, not just during the budget process, but so thank you.
All right, I'll compound a little bit on what was said before. The clarity of this budget and last year's budget was able to be understood, but this having been the layers of clarity, everything I've looked for, I go, well, why don't they define that? And then you flip to a page, there's a reference, and sure enough, it's in here. So thank you for this. It's been dramatically different and did an amazing job. Is it possible, I didn't know, on questions that remain unanswered? I keep coming back for the last 2 years on the attendance. And I mean, 64% of the students only attending 90% or more of the time, district-wide. Makes it really difficult to move these other performance metrics, and no matter what, even if we doubled our budget, if the students are not showing up and getting the services, it seems really difficult to make progress. Are there any metrics on the students that are attending, that are regular attenders, compared to the students that are not, when it comes to their performance and so on, of if the students, hey, the students that are attending actually just 80% of the time are, that's really where the curve is. Or it's just, I keep circling this attendance side and it just seems really difficult.
Yeah, we are not disaggregating our data the way you just described, and that is an excellent idea. We definitely could do that and should do that to take a look at. I like the way you phrase that. Where's the curve? So what is the metric at which we start to see performance decline? I can say, based on national research that I've looked at, there is a correlation between attendance and academic achievement. Seems like a no-brainer. When you are in school, you are typically learning, and when you are not in school, you are not learning the things that you are then assessed on. So that seems very simple. Attendance is something that we absolutely need to work on here in Forest Grove specifically, and as a state. It's a statewide issue. So thank you for bringing that up. It's something that we definitely need to improve on.
Our system too, sorry to cut into your question, is our system that we have for attendance, is that pretty accurate? I guess the way it's managed, I know we briefly touched on it previously, but if the student doesn't arrive, I believe within 15 minutes, it becomes a absence, right? something like that?
No, our attendance system is a positive attendance system, so the student needs to be marked absent. They're not presumed absent. So that's a little bit of a twist on what you're saying there.
Okay.
Or marked tardy if they walk in 20 minutes after class has begun. In terms of the accuracy of the data, I can't say it's 100% accurate. As a former high school and middle school teacher, I can tell you sometimes I didn't get my attendance in until the end of class in the next period. I'm sure that is happening in some of our schools. But I have reasonable confidence that our attendance is accurate enough to draw the inferences that Jordan is referencing.
Is there a certain level on the minimum attendance? What's the threshold there of? Are there students, are there metrics in here where they're showing 5% of the time? And it's still in there, or what's the cutoff of?
The cutoff for being
I'll
included.
flash back to high school. I had a friend, he only went to a few classes every once in a while.
Yeah.
Eventually he got a letter on, hey, if you don't show up tomorrow.
Maybe the 10-day?
Yeah, that's a good point. So if a student doesn't attend for 10 consecutive school days, then the state requires us to do what's called a 10-day drop. That's the nomenclature that we use, and essentially we disenroll them from school if there's 10 consecutive absences. That is a little bit different than what I think you're describing, which
You're
is
showing up for weight training
Yeah.
once a week. Yeah.
you dip in once in a while, and typically students like that remain enrolled throughout the entire school year. Are they included in our data? Yes, they are.
All right, thank you.
I'm glad we brought up the 10-day drop because I think in this era where we have students who are being threatened by outside sources and their families are being threatened by outside sources through no fault of their own, that we have students who are reluctant to come to school. And they will hit that 10-day drop and be dropped. And we have a responsibility, in my understanding, to find out where they went so that we can forward their records onto that school district in the event they re-enroll someplace else. That's a very unsatisfactory process for me personally, because it's not our fault that the student is not coming to school. It is somebody else's fault, and they are not taking the responsibility as adults. And that concerns me. This is, I guess, the silo activity that I have talked about in the past. You people are sick of hearing of it. We talk about housing, we talk about childcare, we talk about education. But this is something that crosses all of that. And it is a school's job to teach public responsibility and public awareness and to become an educated, informed member of the electorate. If we do nothing else, we better do that. And we don't get that chance because somebody else doesn't see the responsibility, the importance of education, of a free and appropriate public education. And we are getting blamed for that. One of my comments here, and I borrowed this budget from Ms. Clute, and I apologize, I scribbled in it. You can't give it to anybody else.
It's yours.
But I'm always reminded of that great philosopher Pogo, who said, we've met the enemy and he is us. Oh, it's almost like we're engaged in a circular firing squad at times, and the school board needs to take its responsibility seriously, and I think we do. And there are things we can improve on. School district needs to take what it does seriously, and society needs to take what it does seriously. We can't just dismiss people because they are in this country without documentation. I'm not gonna use the word illegal. If that is the most serious quote, crime, close quote, that they have committed of coming into this country, we are still responsible for them under the Constitution. And we still have to take care of them. And other sections of this society are not doing that. And are actively preventing schools from doing what they should be doing. That's one comment I have, and I want to second what everybody else has said about the excellent job you've done on the budget. The budget message is something that I spend a lot of time with. Because if I start looking at Ms. Klut's figures, this 1,000-yard stare comes over me. And you add flesh to the skin and bones of that budget document when you write the budget message. This is something that you have to do. A plan is a budget, and a budget is a plan. One of your predecessors put that into my head a number of years ago. And I try not to lose sight of that. That there is a figurative holding of hands between you and Ms. Klute when you're putting together this budget, so that you know what the numbers are and she knows what the figures are that you are using, she knows what the poetry is that you're putting in there. So thank you both. I don't have any other questions other than I hope someday we'll get the message to the state legislature and to the Federal Department of Education before it goes the way of the California Condor, that we are all in this together. It's not a my job, your job type of situation. Thank you for putting up with me.
Oh, well said, Director Torres. You said it for all, I think. Thank you so much for being here, and for David, thank you for your experience and leadership together, because you've done a great job with this budget. This is my fifth budget. And it was a very, very interesting just to read through the lines where we were like the first budget I was there and the fifth budget I am here today. And then I wasn't very happy with it, but you know that what can you do about it? There's nothing you can do about it. The numbers are there, and it's very important to keep up with the numbers. We don't want to go under the numbers, and we don't want to go over the numbers because we don't have money to go over the numbers. But transparency is very important to be communicating with the community, like you said earlier here. Transparency and communication is very, very important. And what you've done this year with having all the forums that we had, this was very important so the community knows what's going on. And if to continue on with this, I think that would be a great venture in a way that people out of here know what's going on as soon as we can. Not just the last 2-3 months of the project, but right from the beginning of the year. I mean, I just saw that here, the updated thing for the May 20th release, revenue growth is updated, is coming up. So are we going to get something from that? Might be getting something from that? No. Okay, but this is the only question I have. I just want to know if there's any way that we're going to get something from that or not.
No way.
No way. Okay, all right, that's it.
Only if we take it to Reno and put it on red.
Well,
I'm done.
I just like to say, for the team, you know, Eileen, you and, your whole team and, you know, the whole community in the district office, putting together the budget. And I have been here since 2011, watching and reviewing these budgets. And I remember a number of years ago when you took Corvallis and Linville, there must have been 5 different budget books, and we had a team and we went through them. And we picked out the best things that we thought would help to improve, the budget so that people could understand it. And, it continually evolves and the budget booklet is for people can understand it. So, I'm really appreciative as each time it gets easier. And I want to say that, we're at a point now where I think when you said, we have a lot of work ahead. And I really think that perhaps an idea is that as situations come out, whether it's July or September or November, that you email the budget committee and say, we could really appreciate you reaching out to a few of your neighbors, to your church group, your organization groups. This is where, we're really challenged and we need more people. And I think one of the things that's, it hasn't surprised me over the years, but this primary that just happened, only 4,000 people voted. And that's Forest Grove and Cornelius. And I don't have the exact numbers, but I think Forest Grove's population is between 25 and 30,000. And something like that. And Cornelius is 15,000. And only 4,000 people voted. So my thought is that if somehow a communication could go out, and if each person just went and called 2 people, 3 people, and a form letter or something, and we just have to reach more people to get involved and understand what's going on, because it's when you see a crisis like this happening and it's affecting our students and affecting our future. And, it's really good to see the state revenues are stable. They're not going backwards, but it does not look good for enrollment for the next 3 to 5 years. So that would be my only suggestion. And again, I really appreciate it takes a village. And we are so thankful that we have such honest people with such integrity and willingness to work and help people understand our budget. So again,
See, stepping up is very, very important, and I just do not see it right now behind us here in the comments. We felt the community was going on and nobody shows up. Like I said in the first meeting, I wondered how long we're gonna be in here. I really thought we're gonna be here for about a month or so, just talk about the budget because of what's going on during this year. But hey, you know what? We discussed it all together, but no one else in here came to discuss it with us. No more than just the forums when they were here, they talked about it. But you would think there'll be some kind of comments from the community. Why it doesn't happen, I don't know. I have no idea.
I think just echoing everyone's appreciation of, it was very digestible. The budget, just understanding that overwhelming. I think this is my first time looking at that many numbers and trying to just understand everything. But I think you did a beautiful job of articulating everything and explaining everything. I also enjoyed the clip that Christy sent out of you explaining, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's good in an environment. It kind of like goes with the engagement that we're wanting to see with the community and kind of taking something that can be so complex and breaking it down and just having those little snippets of you or anyone explaining certain portions of our budget or whatever conversations we're having and posting those online with consent, of course, can make it so that our community members can be more engaged. I feel like a lot of it's very overwhelming, and watching a 2-hour video of the budget committee can it's a lot to take in. But those little snippets of this is the important issue or this is what we want people to pay attention to, and just putting those all over online and being open to taking in those questions, I think would be very valuable. I myself took a poll of my friends and my community members online, and they also agreed that they would like to see some sort of mini breakdown of what we talk about, whether that be a little snippet of videos, or I even offered to volunteer to just give like a 5-minute summary of what was spoken about, and I think that can really help with community engagement and kind of helping correct people's perceived notions of what it is exactly a board does and what we do with our money. Because I think it's easy for ideas to be perpetuated, but maybe not so much the facts. Those are just my thoughts on it, but other than that, I thought it was great, and I think my only question is, how does summer school programs, is that included in the budget, or how does that work?
So that's a great question. Yeah. Summer school programs is included in the budget, in the 200s or the special revenue funds. That is part of that, that extra $1 million also supports that because we didn't know if we had the grant yet when we built this budget. So that extra $1 million also covers some of that.
Sorry. So I guess if it is in the budget and that's covered, do we anticipate kind of like decreases in what we're offering during summer school? Or should we be worried about that, or are we good for right now?
No, this is an excellent question. The state of Oregon did something different with their summer grant this year, and before I describe the difference, I'll describe what was. The summer grants for last summer were allocated to school districts based on their identified literacy needs. So there was an algorithm created that ranked all the school districts across the state. And literacy was one of the key variables in that algorithm. There were some others as well. Different student demographics were looked at. Last summer, so the summer of 2025, Forest Grove was identified for a summer grant. That process that the state undertook received a lot of criticism. And so for this summer, the state opened up a competitive grant process. It was no longer a formula grant that was issued to school districts. It was competitive. So we applied, as one of many school districts across the state did. We were awarded the grant. We were awarded $1 million for a 3-year period. So this is different in that it is a 3-year commitment that the state of Oregon has undertaken. So for the next 3 years, we are, at least in theory, solid in receiving $1 million per summer for summer programming. Will it result in reduced funding or reduced programming? Absolutely not. In fact, if anything, it bolsters the programming that we had already planned. This district has benefited from migrant summer programs for many, many years. And so that has served as a foundation that we can use to build upon additional programming when we receive additional monies. And so last year, for example, we partnered with Adelante in Paris, with Centro, with the city of Forest Grove to offer some summer programming. And then we had our own internal, very rigorous, robust programming to go along with that. We're going to do all of that this summer as well, plus some more. We also partner with CBAP using those summer program funds. And you're nodding your head. Do you know what CBAP is? Okay, excellent. For those of you who don't know, it's an exceptional summer program where students with special needs participate in summer programming alongside what we would refer to as typical students. And they have a fantastic summer program that includes, in some cases, some academic content and academic learning. But in addition to that, it's the shared experience that the students undertake. So if you're interested in seeing a program that is full of joy and excitement every single day that the students come to school, I recommend that you volunteer for CBAP. It's pretty cool.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. So you've done it.
I have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible fun.
Well,
Very rewarding.
those are all my questions. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.
I guess comments I would offer, I would echo what others have said, that the quality of the materials is excellent. I can tell this has been refined over many years. It keeps improving and getting better. So it's not your first rodeo by any stretch, and it shows that it's well put together. It's comprehensive, it's understandable. So real kudos to you for putting all that together. I know it's a huge huge amount of work. As I think about the process that we went through this year, especially the discussion about the reduction in forces that happened in the listening session that we had. I think we all took a key learning that we got the order backwards a little bit there. The listening session prior to making the decisions would have felt better. I don't think it would have changed the outcome, but I think it would have helped community members and those affected staff members feel a little bit more listened to and heard prior to the decision. So that's a good thing for us to learn. I would also just encourage those of us who are young in our tenure on this committee to stick with it, because it takes a lot of years to get some skill around this budgeting process. You can't do it once or twice and feel like you got it. So it's an investment, but it's really well worth the time. And I certainly intend to continue my service as long as I'm able to do so, but I can provide value to this effort.
Yeah, thank you.
I echo what everyone else said. It's very well organized. It's very easy to read. I've been doing this a long time. This is my last year. And I appreciate how well organized it is, and you make it very easy to understand. I also appreciate that we are not doing deficit spending this year. And I appreciate that you guys are focused heavily on the contingency fund, because I think that's going to be very necessary in the next 5+ years as our enrollment goes down. And I really hope the community understands that this year is not the only year of cuts, the cuts will have to continue in the future.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Until morale.
Well, we're not gonna go quite that far. Thank you for taking the time to go around and express your thinking or ask additional questions. That's super helpful. I think at this point, we go to our options. And after we review the options, we'll turn it back over to our committee chair. One thing I do want to say though, regardless of how tonight ends up, whether we take a vote to recommend the budget or we continue to a third meeting, I do want to put out there that questions don't need to stop today. So as you go through the book, if you find additional things that you're curious about, please reach out. We're happy to continue to answer questions. With that, I'll turn it back to you for the old.
Actually, turn it over to Nick Carlos to continue.
Thank you. We have three options to approve the budget as is, to amend appropriations by major function, increase or decrease or move, or we can adjourn to allow time to digest and consider additional information. We can go ahead and have a roll call on the first vote, which is approve the budget as is.
I believe,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, excuse me if I could, I would make a motion to approve the budget as is.
Yeah.
And if it's seconded, then we would
Yes,
discuss that, and if we approve that, then I think we're pretty much done.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
so I think I heard
You seconded.
Director Franco, second my motion.
All right. Any discussions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciated it having everybody say something about their thoughts. I think one of the things for me personally, I can decide what I think about the budget, but it was important, at least for me, this is just me making a decision on approving. And then again, this still will come to the board for additional discussion, and then whatever feedback we hear between them to be able to talk about. But I was thinking about, it's just helpful for me to hear that, to check my own thinking and see that, okay, everybody else, all these different perspectives, but I get the sense that for the most part, people were feeling comfortable. So that was helpful to know. I mean, I know you made the motion, Pete, but I just think it was important to get a sense of where everybody was. And I think in the past, and there were times where I didn't realize maybe there was some questions still, or there were people that had questions, and I wanted to make sure before I voted, but there's, it's a conversation about, am I voting for, if I approve the budget, if I like this budget and comfortable, yes. But I think the extra layer for me this year was thinking about, okay, I want to check and make sure I like this budget, but that's why we have a committee. And so that's what I've appreciated on this committee is I think it's important if there's a person that's like, no, I still don't feel comfortable. That doesn't mean I wouldn't vote yes, but at least it gives me a feeling of where we all are as a group. And I think that's a piece of the work we're trying to do. That's my only
I
comment.
agree with you, and like I said earlier, I just do not feel good about this budget, but there's nothing I can do about this budget because I see the numbers, I see where we're going. My active teacher, and then we talked it over, and then there's many things about it that things doesn't, I mean, they don't add, they do add, but unfortunately, it's one of them that we just don't have any other choices in a way. That's how I feel about it.
I do feel encouraged though by the effort behind it all though.
And I would add that we had that forum that where we were in the circle of this room, and there was a considerable amount of tension
Yeah, there was.
in that room, and that was good. We do own the fact we got things though, the cart before the horse on that. But that's a lesson learned, and we will apply that, I'm sure, next year when we have the discussion, this kind of discussion, and when we try to give more information to staff to make the wisest possible decision. I think we've learned that lesson. We've done some of those things. We will continue to learn lessons. We will continue to be yelled at. But we will continue to be yelled at in a fashion that drives us to do the right thing. And I think we're doing the right thing. I'm going to call the question.
Let's call for a question. We have a motion that was, and then seconded. We had our discussion, so let's go ahead and vote for now. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The budget passes. Thank you very much for passing the budget. Thank you very much for being in here with us all together. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you for doing a great job as chair of the budget committee. That's not a
Go ahead.
valuable task.
I might, just a point of order, I might ask that we redo the vote as a roll call vote on this budget.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can amend that vote, how that works.
Yeah, I would also ask that we do a.
So Bethany can record.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
For records, okay.
Can I make a note of discussion before?
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
go
there was
ahead.
additional discussions.
So the last year I voted to adjourn and have additional information. It's time to review. This year, I think I call it the round table or the community discussion was really important and gave a lot of insight and the knowledge that just even the thoughts that brought to light. And sometimes it was existential and sometimes it was budget related. And I think I'm going to vote to approve it. But I'd like to encourage if those discussions or those opportunities present themselves in the next year.
Next time.
I know we can't meet as a forum in the meantime, but if those opportunities are there to meet more in the future with community or have it to be open to the public, even if it's not directly around the budget time, I think that helps, and I certainly couldn't imagine it hurting anything. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussions or comments before we vote? All right, let's go ahead and do the roll call. Jennifer Thomas,
Yes.
Susan Field,
Yes.
Melinda Fisher,
Yes.
Lisa Franco,
Yes.
Kate Grandusky, Nicholas Hopkins, yes. Christy Copton,
Yes.
Alma Lozano,
Yes.
Jordan Miller,
Yes.
Pete Truex.
Yes.
Right now we can say that the budget's passed, sounds good. So if there's no other business around here tonight, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:30 2. Thank you.
You,
That's it.
yes, good job.